Mornings have a rhythm. You can hear it, feel it. And at Quaker, we fuel it. With 100% whole grain oats and a good source of fiber in every bowl, helping you turn that rhythm into your soundtrack for a great day. Fuel to start whatever's next. Quaker, official sponsor of FIFA World Cup 26.
Let's go! Let's go!
LinkedIn is pretty amazing at helping you grow your small business. We cannot stop your new clients from emailing you at 3 a.m. We can help you sell, market, and hire in one place. We cannot help you be in 3 places at once. And while we can't help you organize your calendar, LinkedIn can help you land more clients so you have a calendar to organize. Grow your small business on LinkedIn. Learn more at linkedin.com/smallbusiness.
Welcome back, listeners. You're tuned into the well-seasoned Librarian. I'm Xavier, and I'm glad you've joined us for Season 17, Episode 7. We're in for a treat today as our host, Dean Jones, sits down with Adam Kingl, the mind behind the new book, Executive Eats, the cookbook for a better working life. If you've been struggling with focus, afternoon slumps, or just feeling a bit scattered, this conversation is for you. Adam has managed to blend nutritional science with culinary art to help us fuel our brains for the workday. So, settle in and let's get started. Dean, over to you.
Welcome to the podcast. Today I'm speaking with author Adam Kingl about his new book, Executive Eats. Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Adam, you spent years in a high-pressure world of business education, but you also trained at Le Cordon Bleu and worked the line at the Trattoria. When you were in those kitchens, did that rush feel like a different version of executive performance, or was it an escape from your academic life?
More of an escape. I think luckily I didn't find myself in the weeds too much when I was working in the kitchen. So funny enough, I found it, and this is probably going to sound maybe odd to your listeners, particularly professionals, culinary professionals, oddly relaxing. And I think it had to do with repetitive motion, the kind of the perfection of creating something that comes from lots of literature on mindfulness. So I actually really enjoyed it, and I found it a nice kind of detour from, what I was doing for other parts of the week. Now, of course, that would have been entirely different if, for example, I was in a Michelin kitchen, and particularly just starting out, and getting yelled at. My executive chef was a very nice guy, and he liked the idea of, giving us instruction and then letting us get on with it if it appeared that we knew what we were doing.
This book is a collaboration with the scientist, Dr. Jakub Radakowski. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, very close. Jakub Radakowski. Very good.
Okay, great. Often science gets us what we should do, but culinary arts tell us what we want to do. Was there ever a moment where the nutritional science demanded something that your chef's palate found unpalatable? How did you resolve those tensions?
Oh, it's a great question. I think the best way to answer that question is to go back a little bit and explain the origin of the book and how Jakub and I met, which was at Imperial College London. So he is an academic. He's a molecular biologist, biochemist, but before academia, he worked in a Michelin kitchen here in London. So he's a foodie as well. So I'm sure that neither his training nor his palate would have dared to offer any recipes that we've collaborated on that also wouldn't be equally desirable to the palate. So what we found is that we both came from this academic life. He from the science community, I from kind of business education. We both had this food background. So I thought, well, actually, wouldn't it be quite fun and needed, to offer a book for an executive audience where we can work on the confluence of nutrition and wellness and performance, but also this idea of cooking itself, right? As I've just mentioned, as a means for mindfulness, much needed, I think, for the business world. So we're dealing with how we manage our stress and energy in a couple of ways: what we're ingesting, but also in the preparation of what we're going to eat. So no, luckily, I think I can. Perhaps I'm biased, but perhaps I could vouch for the recipes in the book and say that while they have all kinds of different nutritional assets, which we explain in detail in the book, I think they're also quite tasty.
I want to jump on that, because it's not just like when people think nutritional, they think, oh, this is going to be broccoli and steamed rice or something like that. And there's some really fun, inventive, really creative. I mean, this is not like, prison food. This is something that it's really delicious, and you guys have really had a lot of innovation. Specifically, I want to mention something really outstanding, like popcorn ice cream that you feature a recipe for. Do you believe the precise act of creating a delicate dessert like this helps rewire the brain for professional innovation, like in a setting for work, or is it something within the ingredients themselves that unlocks a different kind of thinking?
In this case, I think it is very much the process. It's developing a habit to wire or rewire your brain for greater innovation thinking. So there's a history behind this, and particularly recipes like that popcorn ice cream. So if we cast our minds back 3 years ago, I wrote a book exclusively dedicated to innovation and creativity called Sparking Success. And every chapter talked about different creative media and highly successful leaders and what habits they used to enhance innovation and creativity in themselves and in their teams. And one of the chapters is on culinary art as a creative medium. And I particularly was looking at what chefs did to create new menus and new dishes amidst the pressure of also having to deliver, execute their current menus. And there was one habit in particular that I saw a couple of chefs using that certainly you could apply easily, as a habit in business innovation in any industry, in any function. And that is this idea of bringing heretofore unrelated ideas together. So one chef, Bobby Chin, who's kind of an East-West sort of fusion chef, what he does is he creates 2 columns on a piece of paper. And on the left-hand side, he will just write down kind of standard culinary ingredients or techniques like tomato sauce, bechamel, hollandaise, braising, etc. On the right, he will put things that were idiosyncratic or exciting for where he was cooking at the time, Vietnam. So he might put lemongrass and lime leaves, guava, etc. And in creating new dishes, he would just start randomly drawing lines between column 1 and column 2. So how would it work if I combine guava with hollandaise? Would that be interesting? Would it be creative? Would it be tasty? And so for when I teach creativity in a business context, it's exactly the same habit. So for example, people might say, I have a new issue or a new business opportunity and I'm just struggling with it. Okay, so I'd say, let's write that down, and that's column 1. And column 2, let's just write down interesting things for you, companies, people, etc. You could write down Google, you could write down suspension bridge, you could write down communism, I don't know, whatever it is, and then start seeing what would it be like if Google tackled your issue or opportunity. And it gets you out of your head. It forces you to stop creating using precedent. And so recipes like popcorn ice cream are that kind of combinatorial creativity. And I absolutely believe that if we're making recipes like that, if we're creating anything like that, culinary or non-culinary, it helps our brain to start to conceive of possibilities that aren't based on our experience or history.
I want to say I got the book the other day on Friday, and my son and I both like to cook, and we like to talk about food a lot. And so we were looking at the book, and one thing I loved, I think, immediately about the book is that it's really accessible for people who like to take a cookbook into the kitchen. It's really beautifully set up to be perfect for that. Like, you can really sit it on the counter and cook from it. Whereas I hate when like I do that and a cookbook has like a lot of pictures and it's spread over 3 pages and you have to kind of go back and forth and stuff. But this was really well set up. It looked like for the professional kitchen, but it had I was really loving the personal touches with the commentary from you guys. And then also a lot of the stuff in here is really creative and really innovative and really fun. And I want to specifically mention one that I liked right off the bat. The affogato vanilla scones with coffee yogurt, I thought was tremendous. And my son and I just really we're like, oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. There's a lot of things in here that I think people will be very much like interested in. Can we talk about the design and the way you created it? And also just the sense of fun and whimsy, I think, that's in here that I think people wouldn't guess at when they're looking at the book, I think, originally.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think Jakob and I both had a sort of whimsy, if you will. We really wanted to make it, if the writing was fun and we were telling interesting anecdotes, at least between us, sharing anecdotes, and we found them interesting, then we were hoping against hope, perhaps, that the reader would also find that fun and interesting. We didn't just want to give recipes. You could say, basically the idea of the book is just here are different states of performance, whether in personal or professional lives. Here are the nutrients, and then here's some recipes that include those nutrients. That would be kind of boring. So we thought, how do we try to make this more of a dialogue between Jakob and me, but also between us and the reader? And so we thought, how do we personalize the recipes? Hence, just a little story or a little anecdote at the beginning of the recipes. And I'm glad you picked up on the affogato vanilla scones. I think it's another example of a combinatorial, creativity. I've lived in Britain now for 27 years, half my life.
Wow.
Listeners can tell from my accent, I am originally from the US. I'm from the California Bay Area, but I've lived in the UK for a very long time. So I have to like scones, right? You can't live here and not like scones. But we were thinking, Jakob and I were thinking of morning recipes where you want some satiety, but you also want a little boost of extra energy. And so I took kind of the British breakfast staple and also, of course, afternoon tea staple of the scone, but think, well, how do we give that a little energy boost for the first thing you're ingesting in the morning? Well, affogato is something that was a very easy thing that we made in the trattoria that I was working in. A no-brainer for a busy kitchen. Someone wants something a little sweet, you just put a scoop of ice cream in a little glass and a shot of espresso over the top. The beautiful thing, of course, is that the hot espresso starts to melt the freezing ice cream, and it creates almost its own vanilla crema over the top as you sip it. A wonderful combination of the bitter coffee and the sweet sugar and vanilla. And I wanted to bring all of that together into a breakfast that didn't feel like something you stuffed in your gob as you were racing out the door on the way to work. And I was also trying to think about something you can make ahead of time. Make it on Sunday night, for example, right? So that you have breakfast ready to go Monday to Friday or Monday to Wednesday or what have you. And then I snuck in the vanilla element with the yogurt. Because I do think, of course, with your scone, you can have clotted cream. But yes, that's a cholesterol bomb. So I thought, how do we get some protein and the vanilla flavor to moisten the scone to appease your palate, but in a slightly more nutritious and healthy way?
There's something this was really kind of a personal thing because I really immediately glommed on to a lot of the neat things in the book that I really took home myself. And one of them was like, I remember recently, and this has happened a few times recently. I don't think it's just a one-time thing where almost every time I have to speak publicly, it's always after a lunch. And I think you see where I'm going with this. And like, I'll eat this heavy lunch that's provided. And then the first thing I want to do is take a nap. Right.
Yep.
And my blood sugar, that's where my blood sugar is at. That's where my body's at. And you got to go talk and you're sluggish and everything. So I want to talk about, in the book, you talk about conditions of performance. As someone is preparing for a high stakes board meeting or a keynote speech where they need intense focus, what is happening biologically when they choose something like a stuffed eggs from the concentrate chapter versus, say, a standard catering sandwich or catering meal?
Yeah, well, I guess the problem with the standard sandwich is you're eating a lot of carbs, right?
Yeah.
The bread is giving you carbs are sugars.
Yeah.
So you're going to get the energy spike, but as soon as you start that board meeting or start your speech, at your post-lunch speech, you get the crash, the inevitable
Mhm.
crash. So we have to think about what could you be eating that would give you sustained energy? And now you mentioned we have a couple of egg recipes in the book, like the stuffed eggs. And one of the reasons for that is the egg, of course, is a protein bomb. And one thing that we discovered in looking at the literature on nutrition for performance is that when people experience energy peaks and troughs, in many cases, they simply haven't eaten enough protein. Their diet is too carb heavy. Protein gives you that kind of steady drip, drip, drip of energy, not to mention satiety for a longer period of time. Also, of course, then low GI, carbs linked to a steady, glucose relief. These might be whole grains, fruit, non-starchy, vegetables. Dietary fiber. I'm sure listeners are familiar with that, right? To give you,
Yeah.
how do you avoid the energy crash? Many of us probably eat porridge or oatmeal in the morning because we know oat give us the fiber that allows for carb absorption, that prevents sharp blood sugar drops. But you might get tired of
Yeah.
just eating oatmeal and porridge for a morning and lunch, etc. And so we were trying to think about other ways in which which we're really trying to encourage or push recipes that had tasty dietary fiber with interesting vegetables, nuts, and seeds. I mean, interesting. I talked about this idea of sustained energy with my doctor recently when I just had my usual checkup, and she was saying, and I love this tip, by the way, crush up some nuts and seeds and just leave them on a bowl on your counter. And with just about anything you eat, just sprinkle a little over the top. It's now more interesting in your mouth because you have texture, you have crunch. But those nuts and seeds are giving you fiber, which are, and plus, of course, some of the healthy fats and B vitamins that you get from things like nuts and seeds, which is also helpful from a sustained energy perspective.
There was a chapter I really liked that I did not really expect, and I want to kind of have you expand on this a little bit. There's a chapter that is talking about mood boost, which I think is really important. I think a lot of us don't consider that part when they think about diet and also just our performance. And we had a lovely thing in there that was a smoked salmon and potato casserole that I was very excited about. And that's a very grounded home style kind of thing, similar to a casserole. When you were researching the de-stress section, did you find that the comfort of the texture of the food was as important as the chemical impact of the ingredients that you're using?
It is a contributory element. Now I'm getting slightly away from the nutritional science here, but we know that when we sort of want to feel happier or less stressed or less anxious, we tend to choose foods where the temperature and textures are comforting, which can
Yes.
imply warm, creamy, smooth. It sort of takes us back to the nursery, right?
Yeah.
So there is that element. Now, the flip side, though, of course, is that many of the classic recipes that include those qualities are, potatoes dauphinoise
Yeah.
or, chicken pot pies and things like heavy cream, heavy butter, heavy, right? And that's not so good. So
Yeah.
Jakob and I really had to think hard about what foods give us the mood boost, while absolutely in some cases, like in the casserole, you also have a textural and temperature element that's useful for mood boost, but also will contain useful nutrients that are helpful to help our mood throughout the day. We didn't initially anticipate how important mood boost was for busy professionals. Over our years of talking to executives and saying, what state do you wish you were better at throughout the day? Mood came up quite often. People saying, why was I snapping at that person? It wasn't their fault. Why am I being so short, or why am I being so grumpy? Of course, particularly if I'm a leader of others, if I am a line manager, I cast a long shadow, the so-called leadership shadow. My people are looking to me as as a bellwether of the emotional temperature of the team or the company. So I have to think about how to keep my mood steady or boosted. And so, of course, there are other things that still give you, if you will, the comforting elements in the mouth, but also the nutrients themselves. Omega-3s, those lovely fatty acids, we often talk about them in relation to heart health, HDL, and that's great. I love HDL, but it also omega-3s are an anti-inflammatory and they have neurotrophic impact in the brain, meaning if we are consuming things that are anti-inflammatory, it's healthy for the brain. It allows the brain to function better. It can reduce anxiety and depression. There are some other things that probably we've discovered throughout our lives that are helpful also, things like chamomile, and that's true because clinical studies have demonstrated that chamomile can reduce anxiety. But I think here's something that listeners are going to love: dark chocolate.
Yeah,
it's rich in flavanols, and that reduces stress hormones. And so that's, so people have asked me, so wait a minute, Adam, have you just given me permission to eat like lots of dark chocolate? Well, yes, I have. But when we say dark chocolate, we mean 70% cocoa plus. So this is not your Cadbury milk bar.
yeah.
So that smoked salmon potato casserole is a good example of, yes, it has the textural element that you referred to, but it's stuffed with the omega-3s.
Yeah. Now, this book has a lot of scientific rigor, and you both have a scientific background, and you both have like a lot of information on cooking. You have the creative side, and then you have the scientific side, and a lot of thought has been gone into this. Was there anything that you were cooking with that you realized, wow, I didn't really realize that this had all these, like I've been cooking with this thing for years and I didn't realize it had all these effects and they really had a big impact on us. Was there anything like that for you?
Yeah, yes, there is. And actually, it's a great question because there absolutely is something that was just a revelation to me. Something, yes, I've kind of cooked throughout my life, but haven't necessarily appreciated, particularly because this ingredient is a threefer. It isn't even a twofer. It has at least 3 or 4, benefits. And even my doctor and the nurse that I talked to when I had my checkup, they're all saying, yeah, you should eat a lot more of this. And it's egg.
Wow.
Now, for a while, eggs had a bad rep. People going, oh, high in cholesterol. Eggs contain dietary cholesterol, which is different from so-called blood cholesterol, HDL and LDL. Yes, if I start consuming a dozen eggs a day, that can moderately increase my HDL and LDL. However, most doctors would recommend, if you're eating 1 or 2 eggs a day, it's perfectly fine and it's not going to affect your heart health. But here I said that eggs are a wonderful threefer in terms of nutrition for performance. And here's what it is. First of all, eggs contain tryptophan. So we always often talk about tryptophan when we talk about turkey or poultry, not in relation to getting sleepy. And actually, That isn't true, by the way. When you eat turkey, if you feel sleepy afterwards because you ate too much turkey, it's not the tryptophan; it's a mood boost.
Yeah,
actually. So it's good for the mood element. Eggs are also wonderful for sustained energy because of the B vitamin. The B vitamins in eggs are cofactors in cellular energy production. So if we're improving energy production at a cellular level, then logically we are improving our energy at a unit level or at the individual level as well. And then eggs also are filled with choline. Choline helps the brain with our ability to focus and concentrate. It improves the health of our so-called neurotransmitters. And then just as a little extra bonus, if I didn't convince listeners, it also was wonderful for eye health, which is more recent. And I only encountered this when reading through the nutrition literature in a little bit more detail, that actually there are a lot of optometrists that are saying if you want to kind of improve your eye health or the longevity of your eye health, you should be eating more eggs.
I love this. This is so fun. The title Executive Eat suggests a certain level of high performance demand, but many people feel, I think the one problem I see again and again, especially in offices and workplaces, it's everybody's looking for the quick fix, the instant thing, the granola bar, etc. How do you convince a skeptical overworked professional that spending 20 minutes on spring greens with rhubarb and dill is a productivity tool rather than a luxury they can't afford.
Yeah, there are a couple of points actually in your question, because it's a very rich question. So you're right. One is, as I was telling people about the book, particularly executives, the first question they often ask me was, well, the recipes are going to be quick, right? I can do them in like 10, 15 minutes, right? And of course, the answer is, well, yeah, some of them, yes.
Yes.
Spring greens with rhubarb and dill is one. There are others. We have like a mug cake, which takes literally 3 minutes, et cetera, but not every recipe. And this goes back to one of the first points that I made in our conversation, and that is that cooking itself, the act of cooking, is also a means of improving our wellness for performance. The mindfulness of cooking itself. I'm an adjunct faculty member also at University College London School of Management. And there is a performance biochemist at UCL who looked at what are their actual physical benefits from people who cook regularly. And there are enhanced immunity, lower blood pressure, enhanced sense of belonging, responsibility, and focus and achievement. So in other words, self-esteem. And of course, if we start involving friends and family, you talk about cooking with your son, if we start involving other people in cooking, it also enhances community, which we know is actually good for longevity. In other words, the length of our lives. We know that community is one of the important elements of that as well. So I'm not just trying to stuff recipes into the rhythm of people's lives. We are trying to accommodate that with some recipes, but for others, we're actually trying to suggest, make this recipe, and also we hope that the recipe helps to prompt or nudge you into changing the habits and the rhythm of your life as well. You get the benefits of what you're eating as well as the benefits of cooking itself.
You have a lot of just amazing recipes in this book, and I really kind of want to highlight that because I think that the variety and the different aims of the recipes, which I think is important to talk about. There's just a lot here. And you have recipes that are very creative, like I said before, like cowboy cassoulet or the Polish beef rolls. Which one of these recipes has become an emergency meal for you? The one you turn to when your own working life feels like it's losing its balance?
Oh my, it's a great question. So you mentioned cowboy cassoulet. I do love that. It certainly has that element of warm, rich, when everything seems to be getting on top of you. It was just combining the ideas of cassoulet, right? That French dish of beans and meats that are kind of cooked slowly. But then I thought about, translating that into cowboys around the campfire on the range to introduce kind of more Tex-Mex Southwestern themes, like barbecue kind of sauce, etc. But of course, the real point is injecting those beans, and those legumes, which are wonderful for so many nutrition elements, and actually reducing the meat elements that you would find in maybe a traditional cassoulet. And introducing a lot more vegetable. So it's actually, if you people who read the recipes will all of a sudden discover this is actually with veggies. So it's not even just beans and meat. So that's one. But to be honest with you, the first recipe that came to mind when you asked your question was a recipe of salmon fish cakes with egg sauce. And the reason for it is twofold. One is there is a sense memory of that. So this was a recipe that I adapted that my mother made. I lost my mother a very long time ago when I was a teenager, but this is one of the recipes that I think of her with the taste of this in the mouth. But also, I know that it's good for me. It's eating salmon in a fun way. It's a fish cake. It's more fish than, breadcrumbs or just, filler. But the egg sauce is a really simple, easy sauce that I'm trying to incorporate more in a number of different recipes. It's just a simple bechamel, right? It's just a roux, with butter and flour with milk added, and then chopped hard-boiled egg. Why? Well, I've already talked about the benefits of egg. So it's just getting more egg in my system. And I know that that's going to help me with my mood boost, with my energy, combined with the omega-3s and the protein in the salmon. So I know that it won't take that long to cook. and it helped all the kind of elements I'm looking to improve on an anxious, stressful day.
I love that. And I could see where that would be very complementary textures too. It sounds very inviting.
Yeah, it is. There's a bit of crunch or bite in the cake, but the sauce is pure unctuousness. But because it's roux with milk, it's obviously much better for overall health than just a cream sauce, for example.
You've written about next generation leadership before. Do you think we are moving towards a future where a leader's pantry, their physical well-being and fuel, is considered as much of a professional asset as, say, an MBA?
Yeah, I do think so. This Executive Eats is my third book, and each of my books is absolutely a response to what I'm hearing from executives and professionals at that time, say over the last few years, like this is what's important to me, or this is what's stressing me out, or these are my issues. 10 years ago, it was like generations. How do I manage the youngest generation in the workforce? And, etc. So I wrote a book on that called Next Generation Leadership. Then it was, we know we need to innovate because of the huge changes occurring because of digitalization and then AI. So I wrote Sparking Success. Lately, when I ask executives, what gets in the way of your optimal performance? What I've discovered, and this is more recent, they were telling me things that were more physical. I wish I had more energy. I wish my mood was kind of even throughout the day. I wish it didn't take me 3 hours to wake up. I'm only a functioning human being at 11 in the morning when I really had to be a functioning human being at 8:30. So, and yet there are a lot of things that can help that. And I'm not minimizing those things. I'm talking about hydration, exercise, sleep, mindfulness, whatever that looks like for you, but also nutrition. What are we ingesting? And I just want us to be a little bit more aware of what we're eating that might be helping or hurting that element of performance. So yeah, so absolutely, I hope that people will start to be a little bit more thoughtful, mindful about what they're eating, but also perhaps the preparation itself as a means to a more balanced life, a life that feels more worth the living.
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the chapters, because you have a great chapter index. It's not just typical cookbooks, it's just a big mass of recipes, where you've broken it down very scientifically here. So you start with energy boost wake up, treats for the office, which I love that you included, sustained energy, which for me is very important, concentrate, helping concentration, mood boost, de-stress, the creativity thing I didn't expect, and I think it's really, really lovely. And then detox, calorie conscious, comfort and solace. And lastly, something I didn't expect also, celebration. I love all these different sections, and I love that you included some things I didn't expect. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, thank you for noting that. I mean, I was hoping that people would maybe be a little surprised, hopefully delighted surprised, rather than disappointed surprised. So creativity is one, and absolutely that's a logical extension from kind of, as I mentioned, from my work on creativity and what I discovered about that by talking to, interviewing, and observing chefs when I wrote Sparking Success. But let's talk about celebration, because when we talk about being a sort of a whole person and feeling fulfilled as a busy person, what I have certainly observed in our time poor society is we don't acknowledge our success often enough. We don't celebrate enough. And the more high stress and more senior we become, the more it's like, okay, now I achieved that. Okay, what's next? What's the next thing? We don't take a moment to say, well done. And how do we note that? How do you put that, and hopefully it's not just ingesting gallons of alcohol, so maybe we can mark the moment and celebrate and have a communal moment with others with a celebratory meal. So that's why we finished the book with that theme. Now, this is certainly not a diet book, but certainly lots of executives, have told us, I don't feel particularly healthy. And
Right.
of course, there are a lot of things that go into that. And I mentioned it, like, of course, you have to think about exercise, hydration, sleep, etc. So we did want to include something on calorie conscious because I'm sure there are readers who are saying, yes, I want to improve what I'm eating. I want to eat better, nutrients and ingest more vitamins that will help me, my performance as a person and as a professional. So that's why we have that chapter. That people don't have to stress necessarily about the calories they're consuming, but they know they're still getting the benefits. And toward the earlier part of our conversation, we didn't want it to feel like penance, that all of a sudden the recipes in that chapter are going to taste horrible, or it's the culinary equivalent of going to confession.
That's kind of what you expect, though, right? I mean, I think when I
Yeah,
think of books like that, that's what you're kind of seeing, though. You expect that.
yeah.
And
So we
that's not
really
this.
tried hard.
Yeah.
Thank you for noticing that. I mean, because we really, really tried hard to make sure that those recipes looked and sounded as enticing as any other recipe. It just happened to be lower calorie.
Yeah.
And detox was an important one because the other thing I'm noticing when I've talked to some executives about their health is they often, oh, I've tried this detox or that detox, or I'm detoxing right now. And sometimes they're doing it fundamentally in a proper way, but sometimes it strikes me as slightly unhealthy, right? Like the idea of, well, I'm just going to ingest, I don't know, cider vinegar and cayenne pepper for the next 5 days. Well, of course, that's going to mess up your biochemistry. So how do we detox in a healthy way? So after there, we think about anti-inflammatories, natural detoxers in the body, and incorporate that into things that we eat that are actually pleasurable to consume, but give us the benefits of the detox without actually feeling like we're taking highly unattractive things, right, to put in your mouth, and just kind of force feeding yourself these horrible detox regimens that I've heard about and read about that just make me despair. So we were trying to maybe present an alternative to that.
Now that Executive Eats is out, and I imagine this work was, a work of love, obviously, but I know that this kind of thing could be a lot of testing, a lot of work, a lot of calibration, especially specifically when you're doing a lot of the science in this. Now that the book is done, what's next for you?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I've talked to lots of chefs, many of whom have written cookbook, and interestingly, they often fall into two camps when they finish a cookbook. They either say, oh, it was so stressful to try to think of 100 recipes. Many cookbooks, if not most cookbooks, containing 100 recipes. It was so hard to get to 100 recipes, so stressful, and banging my head against the wall. And then the other camp is, I had so many recipes. I really wanted to include. I had 400 wonderful recipes, but my publisher, mine included, by the way, for Executive Eats, was like, no, Adam, Jakob, this is your page limit. So 100
I always
recipes.
hear that. I hear that from everybody. Everybody says that.
Yeah. Yes. So really, I mean, honestly, because it was fun, as you said, it was so much fun to write this book. This is the first book that I wrote with a co-author as well, and I found that I got huge enjoyment out of that more intimate collaboration. So I would love my next project to be a sequel, and of course, the best way to hope for that is that there are enough sales so that so I can demonstrate sufficient market demand that a publisher will say, yes, let's make part two. So that would certainly be something I would leap toward doing. There's also an element part of me that would like to go back to the creativity part from my book Sparking Success, and rather than write maybe a text-based book, if you will, almost like an academic book, almost like a workbook, something that's 100% practical, where it's filled with color, filled with worksheets, filled with exercises, again, to this point of enhancing the habit in your everyday life to help rewire your brain so that you surprise yourself with inspiration.
I want to urge listeners to pick the book up and give it a look, because I think it's a really fantastic cookbook. You don't have to be an executive to cook from it. Anybody can love this book. Yeah, this is a book for anybody, I think, and it's lovely. Adam, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. Now, I want to mention again to the listeners, we have links to purchase the books in the bio. It's available today, whereas when we put this episode out, and it's available to all better bookstores. Adam, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.
but a fascinating look at the science behind what we eat. A huge thanks to Adam Kingl for sharing those insights. Their book, Executive Eats, The Cookbook for a Better Working Life, is out right now. If you're ready to start eating for better focus and mood, you can find links to purchase your copy in the show notes below. You've been listening to The Well-Seasoned Librarian with our host, Dean Jones. I'm Xavier, wishing you a mindful and well-nourished week. And as always, we will see you in the library.